Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm your host, Ashara Allen. I'm so honored that you've joined us today. And I'm equally honored to introduce to you Ligia Houben. Ligia is the founder of My Meaningful Life and the Center for Transforming Lives in Miami, where she consults with families by offering coaching support groups and workshops. Ligia is the author of 3 books on grief. She is a wholehearted speaker in the field of grief and loss and life transitions. She is a fellow in thanatology, death, dying, and bereavement, and a fellow in the American Academy of Grief Counseling. Welcome, Ligia. What an honor to have you here today. It's so evident in introducing you that you have really devoted your entire, life's purpose and mission to grief and loss. So we couldn't have a better speaker today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashra. It's an honor to be part of this wonderful initiative, this very meaningful initiative.
Thank you. So I'm curious, Ligia, what brought you to your work with the bereaved?
What brought me into the world of helping the bereaved is based on my own story, my personal story. I lost my father when I was 12 years old. I am from Nicaragua, and I went through this huge loss that really marked my life. So that's what inspired me to study how to help others going through their own process of grief and loss.
Yeah, I think that many people in the field of grief and loss, as I've been interviewing them, all have a grief story that kind of put their feet on the path to this work. I'm sorry for your loss. That was such a tender young age.
Yes, I was very young and I was extremely close to him, and it was a sudden death. So, these things really, really marked us, as you said. And I know that it is a choice we make to devote ourselves to this field that it's so spiritual. I would say it's so close to our hearts, because when we go through something like that, it's like we get closer to the person who is going through a loss. It's like we know that grief is unique and it is different for each person, but it's that sense of recognition, of identification, that the other person is suffering, is having this huge pain, that in your heart you know that it's so huge. So I feel that that makes me get even closer to people who are grieving when we go through, a loss like that.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, Ligia, when we consider our society and our culture here in the West or in America, how can we hold grief better?
That's a huge question, Ashura. That's a huge question, actually. I used to teach a class on death and dying. I taught it at Florida International University here in Miami, and I taught it for many years for Kaplan University online. And that it was a topic that we talked a lot, that we live in a society that tends to be death denial. So
Yes.
death is a topic that you would just put it on the shelf, like if it's not happening. Then when the person goes through the loss of a loved one, when they experience grief because of the loss of a loved one, because we know that we can experience grief due to other types of losses. But talking specifically, when there's a death of a loved one, people, society expect us to move on. It's
Yes.
about time to you move on. It's like, don't talk about that. Maybe the person who died will not be happy if you talked about them, if you're crying. So all these things that people say, all those comments that people make with the best intention, because I believe that it's with the best intention, but sometimes they do not come across that they help you. But it's because we are not used to talk about grief. So that's a topic that is not welcome. And interesting enough, we all go through grief. We all experience losses. So that's why when we talk about these things, having, for example, this summit, it's so important, because let me tell you, when people see this, the topic out there, and we start having the conversation, people open their hearts and they may go to that space that was concealed or put aside, and then they have the opportunity to have the conversation.
Yes, that's true. We need to bring it out of the realm of taboo. And it, like you said, it's so funny that something so universal is cast away as if it doesn't
Yes,
exist.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So, what do you think of when you consider tips or techniques or tools that people might use to aid them in their grieving process? I know you have something that you use, a system, the 11 principles of transformation. Can you tell us more about that as well?
Thank you. Yes, and that system, as you called it, yes, it is. It is. It is a system. It is like a guide to people going through any type of loss, any type of loss. And it is very close to my heart because how did it happen to be? How did I create it? And this was when I wrote a book, Transform Your Loss, Your Guide to Strength and Hope. And when I wrote it, I dedicated it to the memory of my father. And I was writing the book, talking about what loss is, how we manifest grief, because let's always keep in mind that we manifest grief in different ways, different dimensions, the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the social. So all those dimensions. So I talked about a lot, I wrote about it. And I also asked for stories, for real stories of loss to be included in the book. And when I have all that, actually I said, but I want to give something to the bereaved. I want to give them tools actually to go through their own process of loss. And that's why it is a self-help book. And
Okay.
that's how I created the 11 principles of transformation. And I'll share this with you, and that's why they are so special to me, so close to my heart. Is because when I started writing them, I started, and then I said, okay, that's it, and there were 11 for me. And let's always keep in mind, no, that our grief is unique, our beliefs are unique, and my father died 11/11,
Hmm.
the 11th of November,
So it's a sign.
1971.
And then,
Yes, uh-huh, exactly. So for me, it was like, 11, this is so precious. And I loved them and I love them. So that's how I integrated them in the book. And then after that, it has grown, into seminars. I do seminars based on the 11 principles of transformation. I do workshops. I do support groups. I train people to do support groups based on the 11 principles of transformation. I
very nice.
also offer it as an online program. And because, I told you I'm Nicaraguan, I'm Hispanic, I also offer it in Spanish. Everything that I do in English, I do it in Spanish. It's my language.
Good.
So the thing is that with a system, it's to process grief. Yes, it's to process grief. And at the same time, it has like a part, like a dual purpose, because it's to help the bereaved or the person going through a loss, even not be bereaved, that they are in pain, that sometimes they cannot continue or that they feel they cannot continue. So it helps them go through that process. And I also give them tools to embrace life again. So it's a dual purpose, to process the grief, but at the same time to embrace tools to continue living with more meaning, even with a greater purpose. Because when we lose a loved one, especially, and we may be wondering how the world continues. How does the world continue moving if I don't want to move? If I
Right.
am still here, I don't want to continue. But it does.
Yep.
The world continues. And before we know it, we are part of that world. So we want to make sure that when we get into that world again, we come with tools that we can continue being grateful, being able to forgive, being able to express feelings. I am very much into expressing feelings because if we put them on the side and we want to conceal them or repress them, they do not stop being there. They're only repressed. And the danger is that a trigger may come, boom, it comes, and all those emotions that were repressed come to the surface.
Mm.
That's why I'm very vocal in talking about my own grief and very vocal in telling my clients and even seminars, no, express your emotions. Don't wear masks because sometimes we wear masks, including to ourselves.
Right.
We say to ourselves, I'm fine, I'm strong, I can do this. And inside of us, we are just destroyed. So that's why the system itself of the 11 principles of transformation has that dual purpose. Process the grief and also continue embracing life again.
That's so beautiful. And are there parts of those 11 principles that you could introduce us to right now, right here today, that people might be able to use, even though they should dive deeper?
Thank you. Yes. And well, we are going to start with the beginning, no? And the first principle, which I understand better than understand, I know that can be the greatest challenge we have, has to do with acceptance. To accept the loss happened.
Yeah.
And when we say that to accept, that doesn't mean that it's easy. That doesn't mean that it's okay. Well, I accept it and that's it. No. It's like coming to terms with the reality. This is my reality now. Sometimes people say the new normal. I don't use much that term. I say the new reality. This is my new reality because that is the only way we can make the choice to see what we're going to do with that reality. What are we going to do? Are we going to stay there, stuck in the pain and just staying there? Or are we going through to embrace that reality with pain or hearts? Yes, but embrace it so we are able to transform it,
Yeah.
And with that acceptance, that doesn't mean that you let go of your grief, of your pain, you just suppress it and that's it. No, it is accepting that this happened. This is the loss that I am going through. It's painful. Then the second one, the second principle, that's why it's called live your grief. Live your grief fully, mindfully. The more mindful we are to our grief, I feel, and I have experienced that, the more you are able to go into, you dig in with all that pain, but you're able to release, to just, embrace other emotions as well. So those two are the foundation, if you will, for the process itself. Because people have asked me, I did this seminar, I taught it for 5 years in over 100 seminars I did for this organization, PESI, PESI. This organization, they offer continuous education credits to mental health professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So these are people, they are people who work with the grieving clients, with the bereaved and all that. And sometimes they had a challenge even talking about grief. And I would always bring the topic to their awareness because I would say to them, well, if we cannot talk about grief, how are we going to help our clients? And this applies also to coaches
Right.
because I am a certified grief counselor and a grief coach, grief and life coach, life transitions coach. I also like, to say grief coach, because when we are coaching, we are also accompanying the person into the process, so we mentor them and guide them to continue embracing life again. And so in that seminar for the mental health professionals, I always bring that to their awareness. Please, if you feel that you have stayed stuck in your grief, and we're talking actually maybe 20 years ago, and you
Right.
stayed there, you never processed it. What happens if you are working with a client? And this also applies if you are leading a support group. If you have not processed your own grief and someone shares a story very close to your heart and you have not done your own process, what happens? That's a trigger.
Right.
So instead of helping your client or helping the member in that group and facilitating the group the best you can, then you go into your own grief. That's why. And this is going to be to the audience. If you have not processed a loss you have experienced in your life, it's there. In your subconscious, it's there. Go there. Don't be afraid. Grief is natural. Grief is the natural and unique response to the loss. Give
Yeah.
yourself that gift of going there, processing, so you can release it. So that would be the second principle. Yeah.
I really appreciate that you are talking about care professionals making sure that they've done their work, because we know healers have to heal themselves. And it's true, if we haven't done that work, it can leak out, it can have unhealthy boundaries. And it's just that acknowledgement. It's really good to know that you work with healthcare practitioners as well, not just with people who've experienced a loss who are clients of yours, but people who are specifically in service to the bereaved. So that's very good to know. And I hope you'll tell us a little bit about your center in Miami.
Thank you. Yes. And the center, it's Center for Transforming Lives. And when I opened it, and the transforming lives, where does that come from? The name, no? Because I have a slogan. I even have it on at my office, that it says, transform your loss, transform your life. Because I believe that as we transform our laws, we transform our lives. And that's why I chose that name, the Center for Transforming Lives, because my hope, my purpose, my mission, my heart is in helping others going through loss, transforming their losses so they can transform their lives. So, what have I offered at the center? And I say have I because at the present time, because of the unique situation we are going through, with the social distancing, with
Mm-hmm.
the coronavirus and all that, right now I am not offering groups because of the social distancing. So, but at the center, I am also big into meditation. And I believe that as we connect with our inner selves, and we can meditate, Ashura, wherever we are. I believe in that. You
Yeah.
can just go to your center, go still, connect, and that's it. That's it. So I used to teach meditation classes and also conducting seminars and workshops for people to come. And for example, the principles, give you an example, the 11 principles, it can be also offered, was offered as a seminar slash coaching group for 8 weeks. For 8 weeks, so people would come every week and we would cover it, with me presenting on a PowerPoint some key factors or points of each principle, and then we would discuss and we'll process as a group. But it's more than a support group. I like to call it a coaching group because of that aspect of coaching that is helping people to move forward. Because, and I want to say the difference that I find in between moving on and moving forward.
Right.
Because that, and you remember that I said at the beginning that people say it's time to move on, and people say it again with their heart, no?
Right. But
However, yeah, when I think about moving on, It's like, okay, you move on, you continue with your life, you move on, and you leave what happened to you, and talking specifically about the loss of a loved one, behind, and you move on. What is the difference with moving forward? That is to advance, move forward in your life. And you can do that with your loved one in your heart, because we always bring our loved one in our hearts. And you can even find ways to honor your loved one in whatever you do, and you do it in to honor them. You move forward with so much joy, with so much love, with so much meaning. And that's how I see the difference, from move on to move forward. So with that is that we would do the coaching groups, and it was great, it was beautiful, and it was 8 weeks, because I told you it's 11 principles. That, for example, for when it's online, it's 12 weeks, because the first week it's as an introduction to what losses are. Because again, because it's a topic that we don't talk about, sometimes people tell you, Ligia, I don't know what happens to me. I am stuck. Let's say that they come for a coaching session. No, I'm stuck. I want to achieve this in my life. I want to make this happen, but I can't. I don't know what is keeping me in this place. And then we start talking, and I have um, an instrument, as we call it, that is called history of losses, that I ask people to, go back into their lives to see the history of losses, and to
Mm.
see how they have processed it, how they have handled them, how they have coped with them. And in doing that, many times, Ashra, and this is incredible, that many times I have noticed that that client have not processed a loss from the past.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that lack of processing, they have stayed stuck there. So they have carried that loss in their hearts with pain, and sometimes with the worst messages that we can give to ourselves. And that has not allowed them to move forward, to achieve that goal that they wanted to achieve in life, because their heart and their thoughts even stay there.
Yeah.
So what we do is we process the loss, we go through the grieving process, and then once they release that, and they're able to, 4 steps: acknowledge the emotion, acknowledge the grief, validate it. What makes me feel grief? What makes me grieve right now? Process it, either talking about it, writing, crying, running, whatever that helps you with the energy, to move the energy. And once you do that, release it. So when we have done that, and they are able to do that, incredibly enough, they are able to get into the coaching mode to achieve the goal they want to achieve. That's why it is
That's
so
good.
important to recognize grief in our hearts. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good to have processes and techniques. And I feel like taking that history of our losses is a tool and a technique and a tip right there, because it also, in doing that, will not only point to those losses that maybe we haven't resolved that we need some coaching and counseling on, but also, hopefully, after listing that, we also are in touch with our resiliency, because we come into conscious awareness that I've actually endured a lot of loss before. And so that's
Exactly.
another benefit, I would imagine.
Beautiful. And now, thank you for saying that, Ashura. And now that you said that, wow, this memory came to my mind, and I want to share it for people to see how valuable to do this exercise is. I'll tell you a story. And this was many years ago, actually, like 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. I was doing a workshop, and there was this lady, and she came and she sat on the front row, on the first row. And I remember her age, because she shared that she was 75 years old. She was from Chile. I remember, from Chile. This was a workshop in Spanish. And we started talking, and she just sat there. We talked and started, conducting the workshop. And I explained to them how to do this exercise. I like to call them reflective exercises. So I taught them, and I'm going to say it to our audience how it is done. You write, like, draw like a timeline. So you start with the last loss, like the one that you are experiencing at the moment, you write it there, and then you go back to the first one at the beginning of the timeline. And the way to do it is you write down the type of loss, your age, how old were you when you experienced the loss, how did you react to that loss, and very important, how your significant others reacted to your reaction. Okay? So when I said that, this lady, this 75-year-old lady, started sobbing.
Oh.
I mean, crying, like sobbing. And what do we do when people start doing that? What do we generally do? We try to console them. People come,
Yeah.
and they bring, they do this on the shoulder, tap on the
Right.
shoulder. They bring a Kleenex. I mean, they try to console them.
Right.
So I would tell people, like, please allow her to cry. Don't come closer, allow her to cry. And this was among Hispanics, you can imagine. People wanted to hug and all that. So we gave her the space. We just held the space to the lady. When she calmed down, you know what she told me? She told me that, she told us better, that she remembered that when she was 4 years old, 71 years before, 4 years old, living in Chile, one day she realized that she had lost a doll, a doll, and she used to sleep with this doll, and she lost it. So she went to her mother, and she told the mother, Mommy, I lost my doll. And she was crying hysterically, And what did the mother say? Come on, go to your closet. You have so many dolls there. Get another one. And she said, no, I slept with this one. And she said, come on, Nina, you don't cry over those things. Go and get another one. This lady told us, crying, that was the message she got. That's why it is so important to write down the reaction of others to our reaction, because that was the message the mother gave her. The intention of the mother was to calm her down, she didn't mean to minimize the pain. She just wanted to calm the girl down, and she told her the best thing she could tell her. However, for that little girl, the message was that you don't cry. So when she came to our workshop, she had not cried over the loss of her husband, who had died 2 months before, and that had brought her to the workshop. That's why I share this, and of course she shared it with everybody, the workshop, so everybody knew, So that's why I share it, for us to understand the value. And in this case, what was not the loss of a loved one, it was a doll. It can be an animal companion, a pet. It can be
so
a friend.
Many different losses.
It can be a classmate. It can be moving. When you have to move, when you have to, for immigrants, to lose your homeland, that's huge. So all these things are important to validate, to recognize, validate, process, and release.
Very beautiful, Ligia, and I so appreciate that you're naming the responsibility in a way that we have towards our children, because it starts with the first loss that they have, and we do tend to minimize it. Oh, that's just a doll, go get another one. And that we're really weaving into the foundation of their being how to handle loss. And so it's a good, when we ask how do we as a society do this better for each other, to remember the children and who are incurring a lot of losses right now, that how we talk to them about loss right now is setting the foundation for a lifetime. So Thank you for that remembrance. And I'm going to, before we have to end, just ask you to tell us about the free gift that you're offering.
Yes, please. It's an ebook. It's an ebook on how to, because when we talk about, again, losses, and at the times that we're going through, we're living, that are so challenging, so painful, that it's important to recognize that there are losses. And it is about recognizing the myth and facts about loss and grief. So they can go to the website, and they, just go there and sign up. They put their name and their email, and they will receive, they will be able to download the ebook.
Thank you so very much. And if people want to do work with you, to get some one-on-one counseling, to get some meditation help, and maybe if you wind up doing Zoom group calls for group therapy, how do people dive a little deeper with you and your work?
Thank you. Well, I have the website. It's my first and last name, LigiaHouben, as in boy, en.com, LigiaHouben.com, the 11 Principles of Transformation.com. I am very active also in social media. I have Facebook page, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. So I am available. I love this. I love what to help. I love people. I believe that each one of us, well, you mentioned that my company, no, it's called My Meaningful Life. And I will tell you just this before we go. The reason why I chose that name, because I believe that each one of us, the lives of each one of us is meaningful. And that's why I want every single person that they are watching this, that they're listening to this, to know that their lives are meaningful. It is meaningful. So for that matter, I'm here. I am, I'm reachable. So that would be a great way to get in touch with me.
Thank you so much for your time today. You've given us so much insight and wisdom, and more power to you and your work going forward. And I just so appreciate your time here today with us. Take care,
Thank you.
Ligia.
Thank you, Asher. It has been beautiful to share time with you and with our audience. Thank you.